Hey, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, with the great Stu Thornley. Stu has visited in the past, did live events with us on his book, Land of the Giants, and his Polo Ground essays, and also did one on the Titanic with Dan Van Mortel, Van de Mortel. And he's going to be speaking tonight about Carl Hubbell and the All-Star game at the Polo Grounds with his striking out of all the Hall of Famers um, from an article he wrote. And the reason why, of course, is yesterday was the All-Star game. Last week we had another discussion about Willie Mays and the All-Star game. So this will wrap up our All-Star Zooms. Just some housekeeping. Next, we've been having some Wednesday meetings. Usually they are Thursdays, but a lot of the guest speakers could only have met on certain days, which turned out to be Wednesday. So next Wednesday we'll have Alex Pavlovich. Alex is the Giants beat writer. He's got a brand new book about the history of the Giants. 95% of it's about the San Francisco Giants franchise, some about the New York Giants. Not much, but Alex is a great reporter. He does podcasts, writes stories, and if you haven't heard or seen him, he's terrific. So he's somebody that you would want to visit us next week with. The following week, I don't know what's going on. And we might have a live event at Finnerty's in Manhattan, whether it's just a get together or I'm doing a presentation. And then for anybody interested, I know they're running buses because the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the Giants are playing the Mets. So that's August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So be on the lookout for that.
What's the date on the Finnerties, Gary?
I'm sorry, yeah, Finnerty's.
What's the date?
Uh, August 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
And they're running buses, you said?
They are running buses. You have to look on their website to get
Okay.
the information that you might need as far as getting tickets and the like. Let me just see. Yeah, you can contact them and you can speak to Dieter Selig for that for sure. So
Gary, I meant the date of your thing at
oh, my
Finnerties.
thing would be Thursday. The How many days does July have? 30? I don't know the song.
31.
31.
Okay, so it'd be 31. So that's what that would be. And one other thing, throwing out this, Eric Roma, welcome aboard. Eric has been on here often. He's got a great podcast called Giant Sports Talk Live. Um, Great coverage of the Giants. So if you're interested in that, uh, go to YouTube and subscribe, okay?
Thanks, Gary.
You are so welcome, Eric. Without any further ado, I'd love to introduce to you and welcome back Stu Thornley. Stu, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. The floor and the forum is yours.
I always love it. You mentioned Finnegan's. I think that's where I first spoke to your
Yes,
group.
Finnerties.
Finnerties, yeah.
So, Stu, you addressed us there. Then they closed down for COVID, like everybody else, but they permanently closed until recently, where they reopened and they found a new location. And for those who don't know, it is right across from the Empire State Building. I forgot the name of the place that used to be there. Was the Irish Sports Hall of Fame.
Foley's.
Foley's, that's it, Foley's. So, Stu, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Talking about the All-Star game last night, I saw Dan Levitt as we had our Sabre group get together as we have for a number of years at a watering hole to watch the game. Art McGallion, who's on the call tonight, would have been there, but we had a weather event going on at the same time. And I figured we could rehash and pee and moan about everything from the home run contest, which I didn't even know they were going to do. Would have been a little bit cooler if that Aranda could have hit one home run just to tie it, so they could have brought up Pete Alonso to finish it off that way. It was entertaining, and that the American League came back. I left after the middle of the eighth, got home. Brenda had the game on, so I watched top of the ninth. Hey, they tied it, and I thought, okay, we'll go extra innings, and they did it differently. We've been doing that for a while, even though in some years we don't even pay attention to the All-Star game because we don't care about it. It's a lot different than it was when we were growing up. And I try not to be just a regular old fogey about everything and say, oh, they don't do it the way they used to do. And I'd like to have a little more substance to my own peeing and moaning. And just recognize it's going to be different. They've got a ton of players, and I think people care more about the home run derby the night before. And but you know what it does? And I don't know how many years our chapter has done this. We get together at a watering hole and have the game on TVs, whether we pay attention or not. We eat, drink, talk baseball, and baseball brings us together, just like what's happened here with Gary. For I don't know how many years, every week we're getting together on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Whether we like the baseball as it is now or anything else, baseball still brings us together, and that was what was great about last night. That once again we were together. I hadn't seen Dan in a while, and some of the others, so we had a good time. But Gary had asked me about speaking on the 34 All-Star game. I can talk about Carl Hubbell, although I was looking more at the fact that the game was at the Polo Grounds. And when we did the analogy, and several of you contributed to that analogy on the Polo Grounds, I did a game story on the 34 game. And, we talk about when I was growing up in the 60s, it was kind of more interesting game, but the National League was winning every year. And for me as an American League person, and then that went on even after the American League won in 71 and was a really good game. The National League kept winning for a lot more time. So my growing up with the All-Star game was mostly one of frustration. But let's go back 91 years or even 92 years when it started and look at how it was done then. And I think we all know the basics of it. Arch Ward, the sports editor of the Chicago Tribune, proposed the game of the century in 1933 to go with the Chicago Century of Progress exposition. And they sold out Comiskey Park for it. And what a lineup. We know who hit the first home run in that game, Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was, of course, in the starting lineup in 1933 and 1934. He was still a really good player. He just wasn't quite Babe Ruth anymore, but who cared? Do you want to see some guy who's having a good first half of the season, or you want to see Babe Ruth? You're going to have an all-star game. You're going to have Babe Ruth. That was the one thing I kind of missed last night. No Juan Soto. Hey, this is one of the greatest players in the game. There's an all-star game, and it's not like Soto's having a bad year. I like to see the big names in baseball, the legends. Manfred did put Clayton Kershaw in there, kind of a legends pick. Good. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a great pitcher. We should see Clayton Kershaw, and for that matter, Jacob Misiorowski and some of that too. The whole original All-Star game was kind of done up quickly during the season. They decided to have it. They had to clear the schedule July 6th and move games out of the way and rearrange things. And one of the fears was that the Yankees were going to be playing in New York on July 7th. And if Lou Gehrig played in Chicago on the 6th, what if he couldn't get back in time? His streak would be broken. But Lou Gehrig said, if I'm selected to play in that game, it's a great honor. I'm going to play. And if I miss the next game and my streak's broken, that's the way it's going to be. He had not yet passed Everett Scott to take over the record for consecutive games played. Unfortunately, he got back in time and he kept that streak going. It was mostly fan voting and the managers, and they went with the venerable legends, Connie Mack to manage the American League and John McGraw of the National League, even though McGraw had retired by that time. When they went to 1934, they still didn't have this really set up as a regular thing, and it was done rather late. They talked about going with venerable managers again, Connie Mack, and it was a little more difficult for John McGraw to do this because he was sort of stuck back in Baltimore, 6 feet under the ground by that time. They talked about the senior manager, Bill McKechnie, but at that point they decided and started with a tradition they still do. The managers of the pennant-winning teams from the previous year. So it's Joe Cronin of the American League and Bill Terry of the National League. And they were looking at where it's going to be, and Judge Landis, who approved the game, said, no, we should do National League. The American League had last year, we should do National League. And because of Polo Grounds, about 50,000 had the biggest capacity, they decided to do it there. And they decided if this is a hit again, and it was, then we're going to do it every year. And we're going to go back and forth between the leagues and who's going to host the game. So that worked really well because it had been a sellout, it had been a big hit in Chicago in 1933. It continued to be a big hit. And the rosters weren't that big. They had only 16 teams as opposed to 30. I think the first year there were 18 on each team, and then it was 20 by the following year. And that meant, you didn't start the great player and take him out after 3 innings. They pretty much went the whole game. The National League got all 20 of its players in, and that includes 15 who are now in the Hall of Fame. And the American League, and they actually got 21 in because Billy Herman, I think he pinch hit, and then later in the game, Frank Frisch sprained his ankle, and the American League said, "Yeah, go ahead, put Herman back in." I think they were out of players by that point. The American League used 15 players, 11 of whom are Hall of Famers. The umpires, no Hall of Famers in there, but it was interesting that with 4 umpires, they rotated them at mid-game. They also switched balls, as they had the year before, from an American League ball to a National League ball mid-game, although by that time they were pretty much the same type of ball. So Carl Hubbell, everybody knows about Carl Hubbell. You know where he's buried? Everybody know where he's buried?
Nope.
Meeker, Oklahoma, and on his gravestone it says the meal ticket. And he had established that already. In 1933, he was the National League Most Valuable Player. Still really good in 34, maybe not quite as good, but a few years later, he won the Most Valuable Player again. So he started for the National League in his home park, and we all know what happened. That this game is remembered for those first 2 innings. Because Hubbell got in a little trouble. He gave up a single to Gehringer, who went to second on an error on the play. He walked Tiny Manouche, and he had Babe Ruth coming up. And he struck him out, got him to look at the third strike. And next was Lou Gehrig, and he struck him out. And then it was Jimmy Fox. Now, what was Fox doing in the game? Because Gehrig was the starter at first base. Hey, you're not going to have an all-star game and not have Jimmy Fox in it, right? So they moved him to third base. He struck out. And the National League then took the lead in the bottom of the inning when Frank Frisch led off with a home run. And going into the second inning, Hubbell has a 1-0 lead. And every batter he faced is now in the Hall of Fame. The first one in the second inning was Al Simmons. He struck him out. And then it was Joe Cronin. He struck him out. Bill Dickey, another future Hall of Famer, came up. And unfortunately, the story would be better if he had struck out Dickey. Dickey got a single. But then Hubbell did finish the inning by striking out another Hall of Famer and Lefty Gomez, the starting pitcher for the American League. So he struck out the side in both innings, all of them Hall of Famers. And the National League increased its lead because in the bottom of the second inning, Joe Medwick hit a 3-run homer. But the American League came back just like it did last night. Last night, I think it set a record for a 6-run comeback. Here they came back from being down 4-0. They got a couple in the fourth and 6 runs in the fifth. That made it an 8-4 game. And it was Earl Averill who had some big hits. A run-scoring triple in the fourth inning and a 2-run double in the fifth. And one of those, I don't remember which one, reportedly got to the bullpen in right center field, bullpens being on the field, And this one he hit pretty much on the fly. It wasn't just something that got there and rolled in. But one of those hits, they called it one of the longest ever in the Polo Grounds because, in that corner where the wall curved, that's where that might have been the deepest part of the ballpark. I'm going to cover my face here. Wait, where's the camera? There. Okay, is that showing up now?
Yeah.
My background? And that is a picture I grabbed off the web. It said it was a 1934 All-Star game. So we see, you don't really see anything in particular of what's happening, but you see the ballpark the way it was at out in center field, the offices, the clubhouse, just a big blank wall became a lot more interesting looking, I'd say, when the Mets went in there and they put that red Rheingold sign and they put an overlay on it to create a scoreboard. Polo Grounds never had much of a scoreboard. They just had those things on the facing of the upper deck and right and left field. But they did have the ads on the wall, as you can see there as well. So I don't remember exactly when they started or ended. As we know, by the time we got into the 50s, Bobby Thompson's home run, they were just a green wall, kind of drab. A little bit more interesting when they had the ads on it. And then when the Mets went in there and they really did a lot of renovation on it, instead of green, it was more of a blue, but they had ads on there again. But this was still a pretty interesting period when the ads were on there and a shot from behind home plate through the screen of the All-Star game. So Hubbell pitched a scoreless third, and then I think he just took off at the center field clubhouse to a huge ovation. He knew they were going to pinch hit for him in the bottom of the third inning, which they did. I think that was Billy Herman with his first appearance in the game. And he walked off like 4-0 lead. He's going to be the winning pitcher. Just kind of like last night, Paul Skeens was going to be the winning pitcher until the American League tied that one up. But the American League took an 8-4 lead into the bottom of the fifth with Red Ruffing on the mound for the American League. And he got into trouble. He faced 4 batters, didn't get any of them out. National League had 2 in to make it an 8-6 game, 2 on, nobody out. And we all know about Hubbell in that game, but who was the best pitcher in that game? It turned out to be Mel Harder of Cleveland. He came in 2 on, 2 out, 2-run lead. One of the runs scored on a double steal. Pie Traynor stole home, which I think still may be the only steal of home in an All-Star game, is on a double steal, but that made it an 8-7 game, and the American League got another run in the 6th inning to make it 9-7. And it was interesting because one of the coaches of the American League was the manager of Cleveland, who was Mel Harder's manager, and spoke well of him and said, let's bring him in. Anybody know who that was, the Cleveland manager in 1934? It was Walter Johnson. So Walter, I guess, spoke up to Joe Cronin, and Mel Harder pitched 5 innings. I'd have to look exactly just what did he do. He gave up maybe just a couple of hits, and but he's the one who I don't even know if he got the win. I'd have to look at that. Kind of a sloppy game. There are 12 walks in it. That's never a lot of fun. 9 by the National League pitchers, but just all around. Can you imagine that, getting in your time machine and going back and seeing all those great players and seeing an entertaining game with a big comeback and seeing the performance by Carl Hubbell and home runs by Frisch. He was hitting right-handed and against lefty Gomez, and I think he hit it off the facing of the upper deck and right, went the other direction. And Joe Medwick got in there too. So all of the other players in it. I don't know did I print out a box score? No, I didn't. Just to keep on looking at 15 Hall of Famers in the game from the National League, 11 from the American League, to watch a game with 26 Hall of Famers in it. And I suppose it's always an advantage for a game long ago. There's more time for these guys to get in the Hall of Fame. I've kind of tracked the 3 All-Star games that have been played in Minnesota, 1965, 85, and 2014. I've got to think who is in there from the 2014 game besides Derek Jeter. And the 85 game might have ended up with more Hall of Famers than 65. But 65, that was, holy heck, what you had in 65. Willie Mays and Henry Aaron and Sandy Koufax and Juan Marichal, and bigger names in the 65 game. And it was almost the 85 game at the Metrodome was kind of a boring and disappointing game. But that kept it going because it was a hit. And they were good games, both of the first two. So you just got that tradition started. And the American League dominated it for a while, and then we know the National League turned that around. We had a tie game, and is it 61? That was the game at Fenway, back when they were playing 2 games. We had the game that Stu Miller at Candlestick, whether he's totally blown off the mound or not, but he is affected by it. And there's one other All-Star game at the Polo Grounds, which I think was the first night game. That was 1942. And it was supposed to go to Ebbets, but because of the capacity of the Polo Grounds, they played it there. So those were the 2 All-Star games at the Polo Grounds. And that 1934 one was, if any of us had been at that, we'd never have forgotten it. It's just a great classic game that would be in our minds with all the games that we go to, and just some of them we don't remember, but there's always a bunch of games that we've been to that are going to stand out in our mind, and that would be one of them. So I can continue to show some Polo Grounds pictures, maybe if I can share my screen.
Absolutely.
And Gary said talk
Yep.
about this, and then
Yep.
talk about anything that anybody would want to talk about, including if you want to ask official scoring questions. And if I'm able to answer them, I will. It's kind of a way to slip that in. If this
For
had
those of you
been,
who don't know Stu, he lives in Minnesota, and has written those books I said about the Giants and is the official scorer there. So Stu, I turned it over to you.
okay, I don't. People go ahead, but if you want to see some other, I collect Polo Ground pictures. I've always
Yeah,
collected.
show the pictures.
I want to see the pictures.
Yeah, and then we'll
Okay,
when you're done, we'll open it up for questions.
okay, I've got one up here, and now I got to get back here. And Gary, you're able to give me screen sharing?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Is this one showing? You can see it's the later years.
We see nothing.
Okay, I never know how to do these damn things. There.
Yep.
There we go. Is that okay?
That's it.
Okay, based on what you're seeing there, tell me some things about it and tell me what this event is.
1951.
A little later. Some things about the stadium. Does it tell you?
The Mets
It's
are
Luke
there by
Brock.
now.
The
Correct.
scoreboard-
61 or
scoreboard in
62.
center field.
Rheingold sign back there.
Rheingold, right, Rheingold.
Yeah, and you know that's why I said that center field area got more interesting looking to me.
In
when they-
1957, the Giants was sponsored by Knickerbocker beer.
And
And they did have-
Chesterfield.
Yeah, they
Well,
had.
but
they had the
we're
ads
talking
up
about
there.
the Rheingold sign,
Right.
and the phrase was "Have a Nick," and
That's right.
And it was Chesterfield. They also used the H and the E in there to light up for a hit or an error.
right.
That's
But
right.
yeah, this is clearly the Mets. And look at above the Rheingold sign. I'm going to find one that's in color because I think that really stood out, that red Rheingold sign. But that was an overlay over the old building, and with a big opening in the middle, but they could put the batting order up above it and the line score below it and the balls and strikes. But this was 62. You know what's happening here? Who the batter is and what he did?
Lou Brock.
Yep.
Home runs, bleachers.
Yep. You can even see the center fielder out there playing pretty doggone deep. You know, Brock was a guy with a bit of power. He really did have some power. And I think it was on back-to-back days that Henry Aaron and Lou Brock hit the bleachers
That's
out
right.
there. And there was also Joe Adcock and Luke Easter in a Negro League game in about 49. They're the only ones known to have homer. I don't know if his went probably a little bit maybe to the right of that batter's eye. Probably just, was able to get it over the lower fence. But, even farther than the ball that Vic Wertz hit that he got out there. So when I get my time machine, the Polo Grounds will be the first place I go to, and I've kind of already decided it's going to be 62 or 63. I would like to see it. Oops, screen sharing is closed because I got another picture here.
Hold on, let me see if you close.
Is that coming up now?
You're good. You're good as
Okay,
far.
you seen it, the color picture.
No, we don't have any pictures, but you have the ability to share again.
Okay, just I have the ability. I have the permission to share. I don't know if they
There
have
you
the
go.
ability to do anything. Let me find that again. Where's the screen sharing here? Here we go. And
Stu,
there we go.
Stu,
Yeah,
why don't you explain the I know
Oh,
you did
that's a
when you
beautiful
spoke.
picture.
isn't it?
That's
I love that
gorgeous.
picture.
Stu, talk about that the essay book for a minute, just in case people are interested, and the Land of the Giants as well.
Yeah, the Land of the Giants. I got working in later 90s. Just it was after the first time I actually got to the Polo Ground site. 4th of July morning, I got up real early. And Manhattan is awesome to drive around in on a holiday or a Sunday. It's easy because it's pretty much of a grid pattern and there's no traffic. And this time I got up real early and I'm going to go find that Polo Grounds plaque that was put in there. And I drove up and I parked on 155th Street, just thinking, okay, the ballpark's just north of, forgetting that it was, below that. It was under Coogan's Bluff, as Fred Stein titled his book about it. So I could have driven around the Harlem River Speedway and got down there to that level, but I parked on 155th and I walked down the stairs, which I think are 150 steps, and down to the site and found the plaque. But more than that, I just got the sense of where the Polo Grounds was. It was that outcropping of Manhattan schist that formed the bluff, and the little area was tucked in there, and between that and the Harlem River. And so I just started diving back into what I knew about the Polo Grounds, and after a bit, I'm saying, gee, I'm doing enough to do a book. So I ended up doing that. And then, I don't know, 15 years later, McFarland, and some of you have done books with the McFarland. Um, they're kind, I don't know. This is the only one I've done with them, but they had done this series on the historic ballparks. They had done Forbes Field and Ebbets, and they asked if I would do a Polo Grounds book. And it's an anthology, so you're getting contributions. Is Dan here? Is he not
Yep.
not Levitt?
Dan is here.
Dan, who did the great, what I think was the best one in the book, the shooting that happened in 1950, where somebody fired a shot off the roof of a building behind the Polo Grounds and killed a man in left center field on the upper deck. And he's investigated that thoroughly. And but other people have contributors. One of the things that I had to do was collect memories from the players and from fans. And I think Steve and John Burbridge and others Those of you who remember being there were able to submit things. Steve Gitchier, who, as he said, he was one of the new breed. He was younger, but grew up with the Mets being there. But the other thing I had to do was get memories from players. And I thought, oh boy, if I can't do this. And I sent out maybe 250 letters with self-addressed stamped envelopes. So spent a load of money on stamps and postage and all of that. And I think I got 70 back, which was more than I thought. It's over 30%. And what the Hall of Famers these days, the mail won't even get through to them anymore. They're getting so much mail. So like something the Frank Robinson was just returned to sender. Stu Miller did write about it, and Dallas Green, and then some people that might not remember as well. And some just said, give me a call. I don't feel like writing anything. Bob Friend, I think Jerry Kindle. So it came out to be a good book, and it had different things in it, thanks to the contributors. As I was in October 2014, I went to the hospital because I had a tumor in my hip, and I was in there for a month. So I was able to get back into this book, get organized. And the doctor came in, Dan Stein, and just started chatting with me. And I said, yeah, I'm working on this book in the Polo Grounds. And he says, oh, my dad did a lot on that. And I said, who's your dad? And before the question was out of my mouth, I knew the answer. He said, my dad was Fred Stein, who wrote Under Coogan's Bluff. And he went off and he came back and he said, here's an interview somebody did with him. And it was Steve Trader out of the Bay Area, because I think Fred ended up in the Bay Area too. Does anybody know? Did anybody ever know Fred Stein directly? And he interviewed him. And so I got that and I asked Steve Trader, can we use this? And he said, yep, sure. So in the anthology is, it's just the laid out question and answers that Steve asked Fred and Fred's responses. I wrote something on Russ Hodges. The only thing I actually wrote were the story of the 1934 All-Star Game and a chapter on Russ Hodges. We know that what Russ Hodges had seen the first 600 plus of Willie Mays' home runs. He was there for every one of Willie's home runs with the Giants, and went west with the team and broadcast them. And the most famous for his call of Bobby Thompson's home run. And even the story behind that it was a Brooklyn Dodger fan recording the final inning, because it's going to be the final inning of the Dodgers winning the pennant, and it didn't turn out that way. And at least the guy didn't burn the tape. And that's one of the great recordings out there of anything, of Russ Hodges doing that. But just so many different things with the Polo Grounds, so many different Polo Grounds. Whoops, no, I've stopped sharing again.
Stu, both of these books are still available on Amazon, correct?
The anthology I know is, and the Land of the Giants, that was Temple University Press, and it went out of print, but either through one of the online booksellers, and that one, if you go on for a used copy of it online, the last I looked, it was kind of expensive. But I think Temple has done on-demand printing. So if you go to Temple University website, and I don't know what they charge for it, but the way technology is now, they can print books one at a time. So it is still available that way. So it's whoops, share. Here we're talking about the scoreboard. Can you see that one? Yeah. That's what the scoreboard used to consist of. If you were at
the game, double click on it to make it bigger?
I can maybe just increase the size here. Okay. There we go. How's that? A little better without being too blurry? It's kind of the resolution of the initial picture. And they have the in there they have the lineups for, I think that is, I don't know if that's Brooklyn or, oh, okay. Brenda's showing me your phone. It's not, you got to do something different here. Are you seeing just a picture of the scoreboard here?
Yeah.
Okay. And is that getting better there?
No,
No?
it's like a thumbnail, I guess you'd call it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, let me try this a
Spinning.
different, let me try this a different way by, first of all, I'm going to turn off my camera so you don't have to look at me. And I'm going to quit sharing and I'm going to use these as a background. And because I think it'll at least it'll come up pretty big. So I'm going to do the video, adjust background and effects, and add image, and this is the is that good background? They're up at
Yes.
the building behind, and this is one of the police were investigating.
That's what Dan Van de Mortel wrote about.
Yeah. I just loved what he wrote. I think he contacted me or I contacted him during this, and he said he had an interest in Bernard Doyle, who would have been sitting out in the left center field seats in the second deck, and the bullet hit him and killed him.
And when we took a tour of the Polo Ground area, we stopped at the building
Okay,
where
yeah,
it took place.
Dan said he's tried to get in there or something like that, and
It's on Edgecombe Avenue.
yep. And these are always great shots. Is that coming through as a background now?
Yeah, the
Well,
Major Deegan.
we only see Yankee Stadium in the foreground.
There's other, I've got some other pictures here that will show just where the two of them are.
See McCombs Dam Bridge and the Major Deegan and Yankee Stadium
And here's the Harlem River right here.
and the Harlem River, right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's kind of cropping it.
Stadium would be over here.
I on the 4th of July in 2007, I went to a game at Yankee Stadium and I parked right about where I parked the first time I went to the Polo Ground site, right on 155th Street. It's a holiday. You can park, and then it probably still takes about a half an hour to get across that McCombs Dam Bridge to get there. But they were walkable. We seen Dick Groat chasing down a fly ball here.
The pictures are too small for the
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta size it. You can see his glove. And that's about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool picture because he's running out there from shortstop and nearly at nearly at the fence. I mean, this what a funky place. Oh, you can see that there was the sign to hit the boat. This was during the Mets years, and apparently Casey Stengel once made a sardonic comment about they got too many sailors on the team, guys who were trying to hit the wall and
Win the boat.
win the boat. So let me see if I've got a few pictures that will fit in here a little bit better.
If you're having a lot of difficulty, we could always just open it up to questions for you, whatever you decide.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we do
Okay.
that? You all know what the Polo Grounds look like, and some of you lucky enough, and I envy the heck out of you, who know what it looked like, not from pictures, but from having been there, because really nothing.
All right, Stu, I have a
beats that.
question for you
Yeah.
regarding your article. Um, I don't know if this was delved into, but the five Hall of Famers, did they all strike out swinging or?
I know Babe Ruth looked at one,
Okay.
and then Gehrig and Cronin. And you're gonna get treated to a picture of me again, I think. Is that we're swinging, and I think the others might have been swinging, but Ruth, they said he put a curveball or would he have thrown the screwball lefty against lefty, but got one in the outside corner, and but that one was Ruth was looking, and I think the others were swinging.
And do you know if they did they strike out swinging on the screwball or?
That I'm not really sure. I think I probably went through newspapers and just had to go with as much description as they had on that. Um, they they talked about the walks in the game, and when I was working on this, Hubbell himself walked two. One was Heine Minutia in the first inning, apparently walked somebody in the third. But a guy named Robert D. Malley, the self-proclaimed sole member of the Bureau of Unvital Statistics. Fits right in. He'd fit right in with us. He tracked the pitches in the game with a breakdown and what happened with every pitch from each pitcher. I don't know where he got that. I guess I've just got a end note here that I had correspondence with him. And the three National League hurlers threw 182 pitches, 102 were strikes that included balls put in play. Hubbell threw 32 strikes and 21 balls. Lon Warnicki, the Arkansas Hummingbird, threw more balls and strikes, 21-20. And then I guess it was four pitchers. Van Lingle Mungo and Frank Frankhouse were even in balls and strikes. And the American League had only 3 walks and a better strike to ball breakdown. But overall, 96 strikes and 48 balls. And Lefty Gomez had 28 strikes and 12 balls. So that's kind of a breakdown of what it was, but it didn't really get any more specific on the types of pitches. I would guess that Hubbell was using that screwball, and would he throw it, lefty to a right-handed batter? That's more likely where you'd throw the screwball, right? To get the break the other way. That makes sense?
Yes.
And my last question is you as a historian. I mean, I started really watching the All-Star game in 1970. But in 1971, the National League's lineup, Mays, Aaron, Torrey, Stargell, McCovey, Bench, Beckard, Harrelson. I won't include Doc Ellis. Do you think that compares much to this American League team that Hubbell did the strikeouts to?
And Clemente, too. I don't know if he started
He
that
did
game,
not
but
start. He
he
did
had
not
one of the
start.
6 home runs.
They had
Yeah,
Stargell, Mays, and Aaron was the outfield that year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just because we remember Aaron and Mays and Frank Robinson. Well, he would have been American League. He hit one of the home runs along with Killebrew, and of course Reggie had that long one.
Recency bias.
Yeah, I mean,
Even though it's 50 something years ago compared to
well,
almost 100 years ago. So
that's what's cool about getting old is that when it was Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays, and I thought these aren't historic figures. I'm watching these guys now, and 60 years later, wow, they're pretty historic. But the legendary status of guys from the 30s are going to be loom larger in our mind.
yeah.
And we can look at all of the All-Star games, including last night, and see how some of these players continue to do, and from Ohtani and Judge and all of that. And Heck, when I go to I've been to 3 Futures games in 02, 12, and 14, and it's fun to go back to those games when they were still minor leaguers and then look at Miguel 02, Miguel Cabrera was in that. And so, yeah, that is what you call recency bias. I see we've got, is that Mars and Frank and Harvey and
Mars,
Eric?
you're up.
Oh, thank you, Stu, for joining us. I want to talk about the configuration of the polo grounds, and I also have a couple of questions for you. Uh, it seemed there were markers in the right center field bull and left center field bullpens. They were 447 and 449. And then the horseshoe curves around, and it seems like just before you get to the indentation, going back to the Eddie Grant Memorial and Clubhouse, that the distance is shorter, like where Mays made the catch to where that batting eye is, than the depth of the bullpens. Do you know? Because there was no markers where
Right.
Mays made the catch on either side of those bleachers. So it appears to me that the bullpens were a greater distance. Can you authenticate that?
Yeah, I would say they were just by first looking at it, and that's the way it is with a lot of ballparks, where you got your power alleys, and even at Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, that was they had markers at 430 on either side, right where the fences turned in center field. They never put a marker up straightaway center, but I'd seen that at 425. So it makes sense that, and especially with the polo grounds for that configuration, where you're getting to 450 on going there. John Pasteur, I haven't heard from John in years. I don't think I even found him when we were doing the anthology, or maybe no, I think I did. He was both kind of an architectural critic, especially with ballparks, and he grew up going to the polo grounds. And quite a curmudgeon in his way. One time I met him, I enjoyed him, but kind of an opinionated guy. And he discussed a lot about how far away Vic Wertz's drive went, that Mays tracked down, and says invariably this gets overestimated. People say 460 because we know that with the notch, that the distance in back there was 483. So okay, what was it before you got to the notch? But he's saying that Wertz's drive is probably more like 400 plus feet because he's looked at it from every angle, and Mays caught the ball and kept running a couple of steps before he turned him through, and got it back in. Still a hell of a drive, and then one that he had to get back on real fast and then make a throw. I'm not sure exactly where he would have been positioned. Wirtz was a power hitter, so he'd play him kind of deep. I just when I put up that picture of Lou Brock hitting under the bleachers, and I looked and center fielder, whoever it was at that point, seemed to be playing pretty doggone deep. You want to keep balls in front of you, but there's so much if they got over you or beyond you. And one of the advantages to the pitchers in the polo grounds was the narrowness of the outfield, that the outfielders couldn't be too spread out. They sure didn't want a ball getting through them into the gap and going to that 447 marker on either bullpen. But they just they were playing close enough together that they were able to cut off a lot of those. But I'd say, yeah, for sure, Mars, that the distances, that was probably the deepest part of the ballpark where the bullpens were, and why you could have bullpens in fair territory.
Well, here was a ball that might have been hit even further than the balls hit into the bleachers by the 4 players that we know of. I was listening in the first baseball strike. They had radio broadcast the 1936 and 1937 World Series, Giants and Yankees. And in one of them, the announcer describes that Hank Lieber, Giants catcher, is a big man, hits a ball in the indentation, and DiMaggio was playing him deep. And he caught the ball in the indentation, on the way to the Eddie Grant Memorial over the shoulder, and it ended the game. And he just kept on continuing running to the clubhouse because it ended the game. That's what I heard from the radio broadcast. But here are my questions. When did the Polo Grounds become the complete horseshoe where they would seat 55,000? Was that in preparation for the All-Star game, like in
No, that was
33?
about 10 years earlier. They finally did all that, I think, 1922 to 1923. There's some pictures, I think, are from early in the 1923 season where you can see the construction on it. You can also see Yankee Stadium. There's a lot of pictures from behind home plate taken out there that you can see the top of Yankee Stadium, which would have been 1923. But they kind of completed that horseshoe when they rebuilt the stadium after the fire. You had that more of a J hook that the double deck grandstand went out into fair territory quite a ways in left field, but I don't know if it quite hit fair territory in right field.
Well, what about the bleachers? The bleachers itself after
Yeah,
the
they would have
curve?
still had some kind of bleachers out there, but it was the whole thing that what lived for 40 years, which is the most familiar look to the Polo Grounds, is where those double deck grandstands went out to the corner, turned in, stopped, and then you had the bleachers, and then the bleachers were separated by that huge building that was exactly where, like if King Kong would have hit one out there off the center field fence, at what point high up would it have been a home run, out of the park home run? And I'm not sure if they really had any delineation on that, or if King Kong would have had a rumble around the bases as they got the ball in. It's just that who the heck was ever going to hit one on the fly? You had stairways in there, and the Eddie Grant Memorial. I mean, they had all the memorials, the plaques on that building, but the Eddie Grant Memorial, that was like the Yankee Stadium with those monuments, freestanding monuments in the ballpark. But that was 22, 23. So by the 23 World Series, that had the look of what we know, that we think of at the Polo Grounds.
Here's my last pressing question, Stu. We know about Hubbell's 5 strikeouts. I went to the 84 All-Star game at Candlestick, where Fernando Valenzuela and Dwight Gooden tied Hubbell's record of 5 strikeouts in a row. Do you consider that valid, since Hubbell was only one pitcher that do it, and it took the National League 2 pitchers to do it? I never considered that tying the record. Do you?
Yeah, I find it different. I guess you could look at it, the most American leaguer batters in a row struck out. And then that happened the following year, the game at the Metrodome. One of the interesting things was Nolan Ryan went 3 innings and maybe struck out the side, and then Valenzuela came in or something like that. But yeah, I definitely see it as a different thing when it's 2 pitchers instead of 1.
Thank you, Stu.
Thank you, Morris. Frank Saxton, you're up.
Stu, thanks for this fun presentation. Really brought back a lot of memories. Not going back to 34, but of course the 50s and 60s. That photo of the center field during the Mets era with the Long Giants clock really brought back a bittersweet memory. In 1965, I was on a Circle Line cruise, the one that goes around Manhattan. And at one point, that cruise would go between Yankee Stadium and the Polo Grounds. And on that cruise, and by the way, I was with a girl from my high school class. It had taken me about a year to work up the courage to ask her to go on that little cruise around the island. I saw just a pile of rubble there with the Long Giants clock lying on its side. And I was so distraught by this sight, thinking about memories of going to the Polo Grounds with my dad in the 50s, and as an adolescent and teenager to see the Mets in the 60s. I just became so distraught that for the rest of the cruise, I barely spoke to her, I guess. And 60 years later at a high school reunion, she told my wife, he was a nice guy, but he was very strange. To which my wife disappointingly responded,
There,
yeah.
yeah. See, she knew it. Yeah.
So thank you
There
for
are a
all
number of pictures of the demolition, and they are sad pictures, aren't they?
yeah.
And
It
then,
really it was very impactful for me that
yeah,
night.
and then in fact, when they've done like a video of the Frank Sinatra song, there used to be a ballpark here. I think they've
Right.
got some of those, but there are a number of different pictures. One showing the wrecking ball that I think they used for Ebbets Field, ramming into it. But as that thing came down, that Longines clock was still one of the last things. There was
Right.
a pile of rubble, but then that clock, which still stood up.
Right.
And yeah, yeah, that's just,
It was a
you know,
very
you hate
stark
like,
sight. It really was. I'll
yeah,
never forget it.
yeah. And, I guess it's a hell of a thing to keep, even the Yankee Stadium, now they kept the field there. They're keeping some pretty valuable real estate, but just to keep the superstructure up, I think is, I wish around here the Gopher football stadium from 1924 into the 80s that continued to stand for a while, uh, for at least another 10 years. They kind of carved it out a little bit to get buildings in there, but you just wish they could keep the superstructure in some way, but it's probably just not feasible. But those are sad photos to look at.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. Harvey Weinberg.
Stu, thank you very much for this presentation. It is wonderful. Couple of quick points. On July 10th, 1954, I was 8, and my father took me and my brother to the Polo Grounds. We lived in the Bronx. My father parked his station wagon on the Bronx side of the McCombs Dam Bridge, and we walked across that bridge. And we went down I'm certain it was 1,000 steps. As an 8-year-old, that's what I thought it was. And we bought general admission tickets and sat in right field. Second point I wanted to make is I'm wearing a replica hat. I don't know if you can see this.
Yep.
It's a replica hat.
Oh yeah.
1934 All-Star Game. You have no idea the conversations I have had in 7-Eleven, Costco, when I wear this hat. I've stopped it because people think, well, you're a Mets fan, and I've stopped explaining. But my question is, it's the kids, our sons bought this for me about 10 years ago. It's a mess. It's blue.
That's right. But it's not the New York logo they wore.
Well, what, Stu, what could you add to the discussion that Mars is now entering with regards to the color of the hat, the blue, the white NY logo?
I'll get my hat.
Good.
Yeah,
Stu,
I guess they did.
You got the floor, Stu. Talk quick before Mars gets back.
Okay. Yeah, I can't add a lot to that. They sell, they manufacture stuff that people will buy, and I've even seen Yankee hats in all different colors and styles, and as long as people will buy them, I guess they'll make them.
Well, I guess my question, let me pose the question is, I assume the hats that the National League at least wore were blue. Why?
I don't know, and I don't know. Somebody mentioned it earlier that one of the nice things about the All-Star game last night was that they went back to player uniforms. And I think I'd have to look this up. I think in 1933, the first game, they might have worn generic National and American League uniforms. and then went to what we remember with the All-Star game. You wear your own team's uniforms.
Here's the
And
logo.
with the hats, yeah, okay, I don't know. Somebody got you to buy it, I guess.
Yeah,
Well,
it was given to me as a gift, and it was a good.
Yeah, it's a
I
nice
like
gift.
wearing it.
Yeah.
It's a conversation piece, and it drives Yankees fans and Mets fans crazy.
Yeah,
there's a
I'm in
little
New York.
nuance. It's just
I'm
a
in New
little
York.
nuance.
Thanks a
yeah,
lot.
yep.
Thanks a lot, Stu. Thank you very
Harvey, Harvey,
much.
I got a quick question for you.
For me?
Yeah, I have a New York Giant cap, and I repeatedly hear from people, "Let's go Mets."
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Me too.
Thanks,
yeah.
Harvey. Ed Freer, you're up.
I can't thank you enough because I can listen to stories about the polo grounds all day long. But I just go back to reflection of one time I was at the polo grounds because you're talking about the scoreboard there. They used to let you go to batting practice, and we'd get there by 11:30 in the morning. And if we sat one time in right field or walked around in right field, the sun coming up over the East River seemed to me, and maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, almost like a spotlight on the field because it would rise right above and you could see it shining in there. I don't know if you've ever had any reflection about that, but it was positioned just right on a certain day in the spring where the sun would act like a spotlight on the field.
Well, that's kind of cool. That's a nice way of looking at it. And of course, I take the shady side would have been the right field side on the south, the sun behind there, and then, at what point was it kind of crossing from east to west? So,
Comes
yeah,
up
that's a
over the
nice way to look at
scoreboard.
it. Yeah.
Comes up over the scoreboard early, not during the game, but early.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ed. Anybody else with a question who hasn't asked one? Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Stu. I just have a comment to make about the first photo you were showing in color with the Rheingold sign.
Yeah.
I noticed in the background, on the Bronx side, way in the distance, was the Concourse Plaza Hotel. And I don't know if you're familiar with that building, but many of the New York Yankees had apartments there in the 1950s and 60s, including Mantle and some of the other big stars. And Harry Truman spent a night there. So, and I have a personal connection to that building because that's where my bar mitzvah was. And whenever I see a picture of it, especially way back in the distance, brings back memories. My father actually supplied carpeting to that building. He was in the carpet business, so he got us a discount. My brother and myself on the bar mitzvahs. So it was really good to see that building again, way back. It's still there. I know the building still exists. I think it's a welfare hotel. And then I have a question for you, a general question about Hubbell. Uh, After his playing career, he became involved with the Giants front office. I think he became scouting director and farm director, both in San Francisco and in New York. Obviously, first in New York, then Frisco. I reversed it there. Do you know if did he pursue that position? Did Stoneham offer it as a learning thing for him? And because he stayed there a very long time, and he was the scouting director or the farm director when a lot of those big Latino stars joined the Giants in the last few years in New York, and then when they were in San Francisco. So, do you have any background on why Hubbell ended up in that job?
No, I suppose, and his name came up a lot with the Minneapolis Millers because the Giants bought the Millers in 1946, and they were a Giants farm club until through 57 when the Giants moved to San Francisco. And apparently they would be in Minnesota for the games, maybe to scout the minor league team. Rosie Ryan, who had pitched for the Millers, and I don't know. I guess Stoneham was just keeping on players who were big, not just to give them a figurehead position, but because they trusted their baseball knowledge too. Is Dan Levitt still out? Dan, do you know how long Hubbell was? Because you do that team employee
Well, I could certainly
database.
look up the database here. I mean,
Yeah, if you
I'll
can
look it
do
up while you
that.
guys are talking. Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of the familiar names for a lot of teams, ended up in the front office. and back before it was the Harvard MBAs taking those jobs, but it was the old, uh, the old wily veterans. And yeah, I would, like I say, when I was researching the Minneapolis Millers, I would see Hubbell's name. And I think some of them might have had more direct, like Rosie Ryan, more direct oversight over the Minneapolis Millers. And Rosie Ryan was well known in Minneapolis because he had pitched a number of seasons for them as well. Um, but yeah, that could have been with Hubbell. He wouldn't have had the same connection to Minneapolis that Rosie Ryan had, but just all of it as they came with the building of the new stadium, that Metropolitan Stadium that was built to lure a team and could have lured the Giants there if Stoneham hadn't gone out and seen and liked what he saw in San Francisco. All the stories there is he'd go out there on a nice early afternoon when the weather on Candlestick Point is great and and find out it didn't stay great as the day went on. And around here, they probably like to speculate on what the Giants missed out on, that they might have been better off coming to Minnesota. And who knows what the history of everything would have been with that. But yeah, if Dan can find how long Hubbell was with them.
This one goes back. Our data, I mean, some goes back far. This goes back to 1950, and it shows him as the farm director through 1977 when he became the scout emeritus.
Okay,
so at least
scout emeritus,
27 years, and he was a scout emeritus until 87.
When did he die? He lived kind of ripe. I've got it here. I've got his. I looked up his baseball reference page. So he died in 88.
So
he lived to be 85 years old. Yeah. And was living out in Arizona, and of course I think the Giants still had the farm team in Phoenix at that time, and he might have been involved in that as well. And then went back to, I guess he was born in Missouri, but he graduated from Meeker High School. And Meeker's a little bit to the east and maybe just a little south of Oklahoma City. As I recall, when I went to his grave, it was east of Oklahoma City, but then you had to get off the interstate and go a little bit south. So I guess more than anything, he was an Oklahoma guy. So he seemed to, have lived a pretty good life, one that didn't make the headlines for the bad reasons and anything like that. The distinguished gentleman who was a baseball lifer.
So Stu, you're the article on Hubbell and this game, along with others, is found in the anthology that you put together, correct?
It is, and whether you're a SABR member or not, and if you're not, we'd love to have you. SABR has a games project, which is just people write up stories of games, about 1,500 words. And now as I'm thinking about it, this kind of happened because as I was working on this, somebody volunteered to head up recruiting people to write game stories about notable Polo Grounds games, of which there were, were many, maybe as many as any ballpark, including Yankee Stadium. That's what always grabbed me about the Polo Grounds, and its various versions. There were several different ballparks known as the Polo that just is fascinating. It kept this kind of strange name that made sense in its original location, the polo field north of Central Park. And when they moved uptown in 1889, and they had gotten shuttled around with a couple of other ballparks, and I guess the story was they wanted, finally they got a permanent place, and they said, let's keep using the name Polo Grounds so people will know where we are. But the game, if I were to go to any one game, I would go to the Merkel game. I'd love to watch that whole thing and then, really watch what happened there in the ninth inning. But with the great teams that they had in all the World Series and things like that, it was just destined that it was going to have memorable games, and maybe the most memorable game is a Bobby Thompson game. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that won the pennant, not the World Series, but that's probably still the most famous home run ever hit. And in the original book I did in the Polo Grounds, got into that part of it. How far did that ball go? There's a guy out of Dallas, can't think of his name. He's probably dead now because I think he was old enough to be dead then. But he would bristle if somebody said it was a cheap home run. And he said it couldn't have been a cheap home run because it went into the lower deck, which means it had to be on a line. You didn't have high fly, short pop fly balls. They'd never make it into the lower deck because that upper deck overhung it by 21 feet. And, you know, we know the trajectory of it, that there were times that somebody's at the wall camped under it, and then the fly ball would come down and scrape the upper deck. It'd be a home run. Of course, home runs could be really short. When Vic Wertz went over 400 feet in the 54 series, and Mays tracked it down, and then what they went on about a 260-foot home run by Dusty Rhodes. I love that picture of Dave Pope, the Cleveland right fielder, jumping at the fence, and the sucker's just a little too high and just cleared that fence. So that's the whole thing with the ballpark. It giveth and taketh, and took a homer or great drive away from Vic Wertz, and it gave something, you know, maybe 60% of that distance. When I'm at Target Field or other ballparks, I try to imagine an overlay of the Polo Grounds on that. So, okay, you got 90 feet first base, and now go out another 90 feet, and then another 80 feet, and see where that line would intersect the right field foul line, and say, holy heck, somebody could hit one to that spot and have an over the fence home run.
Great. Norm, take us home.
Okay, Stu, thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful afternoon for me and evening for you guys. I just want to point out that Carl Hubbell was Director of Player Development for 35 years until 1978. And then he was a scout for 10 more years until he died. And the story I have, most of you have heard the story already. My friend Robert Kaufman and I had press passes in the 70s. And we were in the press box one day, and you could see the booth next to you through the glass. And in the booth next to us, I saw Carl Hubbell.
Wow.
And so I told Robert, look to our right, that's Carl Hubbell. And we had no shame back then. We left the press booth and just walked into his booth to get our autographs. And he was very gracious. He signed the autographs, and it was just one of those highlights of my life to be in the same booth with Carl Hubbell.
It's nice to hear that he was that gracious, and you know, everything that any of us have ever known about Carl Hubbell. Like I say, he didn't make the headlines for the wrong reasons. Didn't get killed in a car crash at a young age like Mel Ott. Didn't appear to have an alcohol problem. Just a distinguished gentleman into his later years, and it's nice, you know, when a couple of kids come in there, that he was really nice about it. I guess I was going on the Cuba Ball trip. No, this would have been Wrigley Field. Don't even ask me how I got it. But Jim Charlton, I met him for the first time, and we got the news Eddie Matthews had died. And he said it was Wrigley Field, and I don't know, before the game, he and his friend got into that stairway somehow, and they went up to the and they just opened the door and they stuck their head in to the Milwaukee visiting clubhouse, and there's Eddie Matthews sitting, and he said to him, "Get the F out of here." So that was his memories. We were discussing the day Eddie Matthews died. I thought I'd cherish a memory like that too. You know, what the heck? But even nicer when the person's nice like Carl Hubbell was.
Thank you, Norm.
Didn't Willie play for Minneapolis for a short time?
Yeah.
Who?
Willie Mays.
Yeah, for really just about a month in 1951. And he
Very
was
short.
called up on May 23rd.
DeRocha called him up. I mean,
Yeah,
DeRocha.
it was shocking to the Minneapolis fans because 13 years before that, Ted Williams was here and was awesome and played the whole season. And he was still property of, he was unoptioned by the Red Sox. They had optioned a number of players to Minneapolis. But that was, getting into the turning point of when these minor league teams existed for the sake of existing and to where they became player develop. I mean, and that's fully what it is now. I think they're officially known as player development leagues rather than the minor leagues. But that was a shock to the Minneapolis fans who had heard about Mays in spring training, and the team was on the road for 2 weeks. So while he was with the Millers for a month, it was maybe only 2.5 weeks that he was in town. And it seemed like a lot of people said, yeah, well, the weather's lousy. We'll wait, go out when the weather gets nicer and watch him. And then he's plucked away. And Horace Stoneham took out a full page ad in the Minneapolis paper, not necessarily apologizing, but just saying, yeah, we understand, but the guy's too good. And of course he was.
I have a Stu Miller, Carl Hubbell story for you, Stu. In the 1984 All-Star game at Candlestick, I had a partial season ticket plan, so like a 20-game plan, so enabled me to get All-Star tickets, but instead of sitting downstairs, they put us up in the right field, outfield stands. And my daughter was born, was about a year old, so my parents came to visit, and I got an extra ticket to the All-Star game for my pop and I. And before the game started, he said, "Where is the National League clubhouse?" And I said, "It's down the right field line. Why do you need to know?" He said, "Well, let's go down there." And he didn't tell me anything else about it. So we go down there, and it turns out he's going to meet Hank Greenberg because he played eighth grade basketball where they won the New York City championship. And in overtime, my pop sank the free throw and got his name in the New York Times. So Hank Greenberg got tickets to enter the clubhouse. Well, into the clubhouse, we were following Carl Hubbell. And he was tall, much taller than my pop and I. And my pop points out his left arm, the way it was contorted. He says, "Look at his left arm. It's turned the other way." So we followed him into the clubhouse.
Wow. That's great. I've got a story of my dad with the Giants. And my dad was an usher at Nicollet Park when the Millers played there. And then he stayed as an usher when the Millers were at Metropolitan Stadium. He didn't do that once the Twins came, but I don't know, for the final how many years he was an usher at Millers games. And the Giants came to Met Stadium a couple times for exhibition games. And after one of them, the kids are clamoring where the Giants were going to come out because they wanted to see the Giants. And my dad, a friend of his, another usher, got stuck having to stay on duty just to try to keep these kids in line. And my dad's changed back into his street clothes and he's walking up the ramp. And this other usher, friend of my dad's, just to get rid of the kids or play a prank on my dad, he said, "Hey, there you go, kids. There's one of the Giants." And so as my dad's coming out, they're all around him, shoving scorecards at him. And my dad said he just took one and started writing on it as he's elbowing his way through the kids, and then handed it back to one of the kids and just beat cheeks out of there, took off running for his car, and took the kid a second to look at it to see. And he said, "That's Johnny Antonelli," which my dad had signed Johnny Antonelli on. And my dad said, "These kids are chasing him. Johnny, come back. We want your autograph." And he got out of there. So there's at least one fake Johnny Antonelli signature floating around out there.
That's great.
Hey, Stu, thanks so much for taking the time. Let's all give it up for Stu Thornley.
Thanks, everybody.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon one day.
Yep. Thanks for doing this every week.
My pleasure, especially when we have guests like you.
Gary?
Yes.
If I hold up a picture of somebody we all know at the Polo Grounds from a long time ago, would the people be able to see it?
I don't know.
Let's give it a shot.
Is that Bobby Thompson?
No, that's the Say Hey Kid.
I can't see. That's why. I know there's a picture of Thompson with a bat. Yeah, that's Willie Mays. You're right. Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, okay, there we go.
All right. We will reconvene next Wednesday with Alex Pavlovich and his new book, and talking about the Giants right before the trade deadline, week before. So until then, have a great night, everybody. I unfortunately can't hang around tonight. I got to go see fireworks. So we'll say good night. And
Night, Gary.
take good care, guys. Be well.
Good night,
Go
everybody.
Giants.
Good night.
Good night.
See y'all.
Thanks.